So what else can we look at in terms of influencing factors in gender issues in sport then? There's, so like I said, in terms of media, it's very um, biased. It's very aimed, I suppose, in a way. So football is aimed towards boys. There's more coverage of men's football than women's football. Netball is aimed towards girls. There's more coverage of women's netball. Like I said, there needs to be that equal representation in the media to have that knock-on effect on our youth and on our future participation in sport. Obviously, if there's more participation by young children, young teens, then there's likely to be more participation as they grow older. Um, so, of course, linking to media, actually, there's also issues in marketing. So, certain sports are marketed to a certain audience, and that is very obvious. Particularly in football, you can see if you were to go into a sports shop to look for a pair of football boots, on the section where the football boots are sold, you'll often see advertisements of specific players. 99% of these players will be male footballers. You will very rarely see a female footballer on display by the football boots. Obviously, that is going to have a knock-on effect on young girls who want to buy football boots. They're going to see that there's no female footballers there representing the football boot, and they're going to think that football is a man's sport, where it isn't. There should be equal opportunity. And this is the case for a lot of different sports and a lot of different factors within those sports. There is a clear aimed market based on gender stereotypes. And again, we need to have equal representation in the marketing of products to have that knock-on effect and that positive influence on gender issues in sport and in football. So the last factor that I'm going to talk about in terms of influences on gender issues is the parental influence. So a child's upbringing or their parents' history, the history of the sport. So obviously we know that women have not always been able to play football. It used to be that men were the only ones that were allowed to play, and only in recent years really has there been that driving force behind women's football and that promotion, that increased promotion of women's football. So obviously parents have a massive influence over their children in terms of sport specifically. If your mother or father is very passionate about a sport, you are likely to follow in that passion, as they are likely to drive you to participate in that sport also. They might go out and play football of a weekend, you might watch them, you might play with them, therefore you are more likely to continue that participation in the future and more likely to participate in that sport as a whole. Additionally, if a parent agrees with the sport that you wish to play, they're the ones that are going to have to drive you out to fixtures and things like that, or buy you equipment when you're at a young age. So whether they are willing to do that with that sport is a massive influence over whether you're going to participate in it or not. If they aren't willing to buy you the equipment for it, if you're a young girl and they aren't supportive of you playing football, they're unlikely to buy you football boots. They're unlikely to take you to fixtures, which is a massive setback for you and your participation in football. Their opinions and the things they say also have a massive influence over you. So obviously, our parents grew up in a different time to us, and they had different social standards, and sport was different when they were young. Those ideologies, they may not have adapted to the current um, ideologies in sport, the current participation in sport, the changes in sport. They may not have adapted to that. They may still hold those old social standards that they had when they were growing up. This may influence their children, because they may speak negatively about a certain sport, or perhaps if you have a young boy who participates in gymnastics, that's something that parents weren't used to when they were growing up, therefore they may speak negatively about it. And this could have a negative impact on the child, as they might think, oh, my parents don't like it, so I shouldn't like it either. Parents have a massive influence over their children in the things they say and the amount of support they give towards certain sports and their child's participation in sport. So, of course, this shows that there are many influences over stereotyping and gender issues within sport and within football. That's generally as a whole. That's kind of the background of gender issues, the roots, I suppose. There are many specific issues with gender in football, and that's with both men and women. So there are issues for both genders, dependent on the sport, of course. Specifically, though, again, I'm going to talk about football and focus in on football. And the main gender issue here is that there's a clear inequality between men and women, where women aren't treated as equally as men. Men are seen as superior in the sport. That's the general consensus anyway, but it's a movement that is slowly developing and getting better as we progress as a society. Clear examples of inequality within sport, though, within football specifically. So, in the recent Women's World Cup, there was a lot of controversy, particularly with the US women's team as well, actually. Alex Morgan, a women's footballer for the USA, so she celebrated a goal against England by performing a sipping tea celebration. Some saw this as offensive towards Brits, so Morgan actually got loads of online backlash for it. Again, this is why gender links to politics, because that could be seen as a political statement as opposed to a gender issue. However, if you look more deeply into it, you realise that the backlash she got, if a man was to do that, the backlash may not have been as severe, because she got a lot of online abuse for it, whereas a lot of men are kind of celebrated for their quirky celebrations. They're publicised all across the media. People see it as funny, whereas Morgan got loads of backlash for hers. So that could be seen as sexism towards her, and because of her gender, she's not allowed to do a celebration like that. She should celebrate quietly. She shouldn't celebrate as extravagantly as men should. Obviously, this is down to terms of opinion. Some people found this offensive, some people didn't. That's always going to be the case with celebrations and things like that. It's just a clear talking point for sure. Another talking point with the US women's team, again, this could link to politics. So the US women's player, Rapinoe, made a political statement against Donald Trump. So she stated that she would not be going to the, I'm going to blank that word out, White House. She spoke very openly against Trump and his ideas and decisions as a president, especially around sexuality and things like that, her being gay herself. And Trump actually responded to the comments made by her, and there was a back and forth dialect between the two, which was very public and not really directly between each other. It was very over public platforms and the media. I suppose Rapinoe used her football platform as a way to express her political opinions. Obviously, this is definitely linked to politics, but again, it's an issue that is to do with gender because Trump has actually been known to be very sexist in the past and the present, which is another reason why this dialect occurred in the first place, because she didn't agree with Trump's views on gender and things like that. And she spoke out about it, and there was clear, constant back and forth dialect between the two about it, and not positive ones. So this could be seen as political issues in football, but it also does root back to gender issues in football as well. So it's not just the players themselves that actually experience gender inequality or sexism within football. So an example is the ex-Chelsea FC men's first team physio. So Eva Carneiro is obviously a female physiotherapist that was working for the men's team, the first team, and she actually ran onto the pitch to provide physio to a men's player, Eden Hazard, in the 92nd minute of a game that Chelsea were playing, a very important fixture. But obviously she was doing her job. Eden Hazard was injured, he'd gone down, he clearly needed treatment. Jose Mourinho, the Chelsea manager at the time, made sexist comments about it because he was annoyed that they ended up a player down as a result of Carneiro doing her job and saying that he was unfit to continue and treating him on the side of the pitch. She was the only physio of the two that ran on the pitch, so a male physio ran on the pitch with her to do the same, and she was the only one of the two to receive these comments, which of course shows sexism, as the male physio did exactly the same, so why should he not receive these comments as well? Carneiro actually lost her job as a result of the conflict between Mourinho and herself, and she also actually received a lot of sexist comments objectifying her throughout her career at Chelsea as well. There was a lot of objectification of her due to her being a female physio, something that was quite rare to see in football, and that objectification and the sexism shown to her in her time at the club is completely unacceptable and a clear issue within football that needs to be resolved. Why should a female physio be treated any differently to a male physio? If they can do the same job, why should they be treated any differently? So as you can see, there are clear issues in terms of objectification, general sexism. I've obviously already mentioned the issues with coverage of media, where men get a lot more coverage than female footballers do. But these are not the only issues in terms of gender in football. You have the obvious issues of stereotypes that we've gone over, sexism, pay gaps, and media, and how that affects young people. So like I said, a lack of coverage of female football in the media means there's less for young girls to watch, which means there's less encouragement of girls to participate in the sport. Like I said, this is obviously a changing thing, and there's a massive movement over the years in terms of women's football, which again I will discuss later on. But there are also many other issues that need to be discussed, such as pay gaps and lack of opportunity for female footballers, which I'll go on to discuss now.